The stadium floodlights illuminated the field as Lucas, now wearing the official Tigres uniform, faced the ball at the penalty spot. His hands were trembling. In the stands, his mother Teresa covered her eyes with her hands, unable to watch. The coach had bet everything on him. The boy who months ago played in the streets with worn-out shoes. 60,000 people in silence, a moment that would define not just the game, but his entire life. The alarm clock never rang that morning. It didn't need to. The electricity had been cut off 3 days ago, and Teresa Mendez stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains that had formed perfect continents on the peeling paint. Another bill. They couldn't pay. Beside her, Roberto slept, his weathered hands still dirty from yesterday's construction work. She wouldn't wake him yet. Let him have those extra minutes of peace. The sound of a ball thumping rhythmically against the outside. Wall told her Lucas was already up. That damn ball, that damn dream that would lead nowhere. Luquinha, she called out the window. Stop that noise and come eat something before school. The thumping stopped. Outside in the dusty yard, 11-year-old Lucas trapped the worn soccer. Ball under his foot. Sweat already glistened on his forehead despite the early hour. He'd been up since dawn, practicing the new move he'd seen on a phone video at Miguel's house yesterday. Coming, Maman, he shouted back, giving the ball one last affectionate tap before jogging toward the house. Inside, Teresa scraped the last of the beans onto a plate. The refrigerator hummed weakly, living on borrowed time like everything else in their small home on the outskirts of town. Lucas slid into his chair, his eyes bright despite the circumstances. I scored 15 goals. In a row this morning, Mama, he announced proudly. Against the wall, right in the same corner every time. Teresa placed the plate in front of him and ruffled his hair, a mixture of love and worry in her eyes. That's nice, mijo, but please focus on your grades today. Mrs. Alvarez called yesterday about your math test. Lucas's smile dimmed slightly. I tried, Mum, and the numbers they don't make sense like soccer does. From the doorway came a low chuckle. Roberto stood there, his work clothes already on, dark circles under his eyes. Some people speak the language of numbers, others speak the language of the ball. Our Lucas speaks the second one. Teresa shot him a warning look. Don't encourage this fantasy, Roberto. The boy needs an education, a real future. The tension in the room was as familiar as the creaking floorboards. Lucas concentrated on his food, knowing better than to get between his parents when the subject of soccer came up. Roberto crossed the room and kissed his wife on the cheek, then placed a calloused hand on Lucas's shoulder. Study hard today, son, but never stop speaking your language. Lucas nodded, understanding the hidden meaning. His father had once played semi-professional soccer before the accident that shattered his knee. Now he carried cement bags up ladders, while his own dreams collected dust. Your shoes are falling apart, Teresa said, pointing to Lucas's footwear by the door. The once white sneakers were now gray, the soles separating from the fabric, held together with duct tape that Lucas had carefully applied himself. They're still good, Lucas insisted. Miguel says the holes make me faster, less weight to carry. Roberto laughed, but Teresa didn't smile. We'll try to get you new ones next month, she said, though all three knew it was unlikely. After breakfast, Lucas grabbed his backpack and those tattered shoes. As he tied the fraying laces, Roberto slipped him a folded paper while Teresa wasn't looking. What's this? Lucas whispered. Check it later, his father murmured. Now go, before you're late. Outside, the morning sun blazed across the neighborhood. Other children were walking to school, some with newer clothes, better shoes. Lucas kept his head high as he dribbled his ball down the sidewalk, navigating around trash cans and stray dogs with the instinctive grace that made even adults stop and watch. At the corner, his best friend Miguel waited, wearing the school uniform that his mother had ironed to perfection. Those shoes aren't going to make it through another game, Miguel observed as Lucas approached. Lucas shrugged. They know what to do, even if they're falling apart. The boys walked together, passing the gleaming high-rise apartments where the wealthy lived. Lucas sometimes wondered what it would be like to live there, to have shoes that didn't hurt your feet, to never worry about the electricity being cut off. They passed a black SUV where a man in an expensive suit was talking on his phone. The Fiwa man, mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and designer sunglasses, gestured animatedly as he spoke. Lucas couldn't help but notice the gold watch on his wrist that probably cost more than his family's entire house. That's Carlos Vega, Miguel whispered. He owns half the buildings downtown. They say he's connected to the Tigres soccer club. Lucas felt a familiar flutter in his chest at the mention of Tigres, the professional team whose posters covered his bedroom walls. The team that played in a stadium he'd never been able to afford to enter. One day, Lucas said more to himself than to Miguel, "I'll play in that stadium." Miguel gave him a sympathetic look but said nothing. Dreams like that didn't come true for kids from their neighborhood. At school, Lucas struggled to focus. The math problems on the blackboard might as well have been written in Chinese. His mind kept drifting to the folded paper his father had slipped him. During lunch break, he finally pulled it out. It was a flyer, slightly crumpled, announcing a neighborhood soccer tournament this weekend. The winners would receive $100 and a trophy. At the bottom, Roberto had scrawled, "You can do this, don't tell your mother." Lucas's heart raced. $100 would be enough for new shoes, real ones, not the knockoffs from the market. But his mother would never allow it, not after what happened to his father. The final bell rang. Instead of heading straight home, Lucas and Miguel went to the dirt lot where the neighborhood kids played soccer every afternoon. Even here, Lucas stood out. With his worn shoes and second-hand clothes, he shouldn't have been the one everyone wanted on their team. But the moment the makeshift game began, it was clear why he was always chosen first. Lucas moved like water, flowing around defenders who couldn't seem to touch him. The ball appeared glued to his feet as he danced through the other players. When he scored, which was often, he did it with a creativity that left even the teenagers speechless. "You're wasted here," one of the older boys said after Lucas had nutmegged him for the third time. "You should be in a real academy." Lucas just smiled and kept playing until the sun began to set. Only then did he remember. His mother would be worried and angry. He said goodbye to Miguel and sprinted home, the tournament flyer burning a hole in his pocket. As he rounded the corner to his street, he could see his mother standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "Where have you been?" Teresa demanded as he approached. "It's getting dark. You know how dangerous it gets." "Sorry, Mama," Lucas panted, quickly tucking the ball behind his back. "I was studying with Miguel." Teresa's eyes narrowed, seeing right through the lie. "With dirt all over your knees and sweat on your forehead. Do you think I'm a fool, Lucas?" Behind her, Roberto appeared, giving Lucas a subtle warning look. The tournament would remain their secret. "Come inside," Teresa sighed. "Wash up. We need to talk about that math test." As Lucas passed his father. In the doorway, Roberto whispered, "You have a gift, son. Don't let anyone tell you it's not worth pursuing." Lucas nodded, clutching the tournament flyer in his pocket. This weekend could change everything. If only he could find a way to play without breaking his mother's heart. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the Tigres posters, illuminated only by moonlight since there was no electricity, Lucas made a decision. He would enter the tournament. He would win that money. And somehow, he would make his mother understand that some dreams are worth the risk. Outside, the night was filled with the distant sounds of the city, car horns, music, the occasional shout. But in Lucas's mind, there was only the roar of a crowd chanting his name, the feel of proper cleats on his feet, and the knowledge that sometimes talent finds a way to shine even in the darkest circumstances. He fell asleep with the tournament flyer clutched to his chest, dreaming of what could be. The next morning, Lucas awoke to the whispered argument of his parents in the kitchen. His mother's voice was tense, strained with worry. His father's, calmer, but equally intense. He'd heard these arguments many times before, but something about this one made him hold his breath and listen. "You can't keep discouraging the boy, Teresa," Roberto said. "Have you seen how he moves with a ball? It's like watching poetry." "Poetry doesn't put food on the table," Teresa shot back. "Poetry doesn't keep the lights on. Look at us, Roberto, 3 days without electricity because of your pride. You could have asked your brother for help." Lucas winced. He knew his father's pride had kept them from accepting help from his wealthy uncle. The same uncle who had offered Roberto a job at his construction company after the knee injury ended his soccer career. "My brother would make me beg," Roberto said quietly. "You know I can't do that, not after everything." Lucas remembered the stories. His father had once been Captain Mendez, the rising star of a local team. Then came the championship match, the tackle that shattered not just his knee but his entire future, the subsequent surgeries that drained their savings, the depression that followed when Roberto realized his playing days were over. "Lucas is all I have left of that dream," Roberto continued, "and he's better than I ever was. You should see him. Teresa, the way he sees the field, the way he understands the game, it's not something you can teach. "What I see," Teresa replied, "is my son coming home with those cheap tennis shoes falling apart. Coming home to a dark house because we can't pay the electric bill. Do you want him to end up like you? Broken and bitter with nothing to show for all those years of playing?" The silence hung heavy in the air. Lucas could almost feel his father's pain from those words. "I'm not bitter," Roberto finally said. "I'm proud, and I want to be proud of my son too. Let him enter the tournament." "Tournament? What tournament?" Teresa's voice rose sharply. Lucas decided it was time to intervene. He cleared his throat loudly and walked into the kitchen pretending he hadn't heard a thing. "Good morning," he said with forced cheerfulness. His parents fell silent, both looking at him with different expressions. His mother worried, his father hopeful. "Lucas, mijo," his father said, showing him a paper. It was the tournament flyer now laid out on the kitchen table. "I want you to play in this." Teresa snatched the flyer. "Absolutely not. Remember what happened to you, Roberto? The medical bills nearly destroyed us. And that was with decent insurance. We have nothing now." "It's just a neighborhood tournament, Teresa," Roberto pleaded. "And look, there's a cash prize, $100. Enough for what? A few days of groceries, a week of electricity." Teresa shook her head. "It's not worth the risk." In that moment, Lucas realized just how deep his mother's fear ran. It wasn't just about the tournament or even the money. It was about watching someone she loved pursue a dream that had already been shattered once before. "Mine," Lucas said quietly, taking her hand in his small, calloused one. "I won't get hurt. I know how to protect myself, and I only want to play." Teresa's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son. The painful truth was that Lucas's skill was undeniable. Even at age 11, he moved with a grace and intelligence that had coaches and scouts taking notice. Anytime he played in the dirt lot back home, adults would stop to watch. "Let him play, Teresa," Roberto urged. "This could be a chance for him to earn some money. Think about it, new shoes, bills paid." But Teresa was already shaking her head. The memory of Roberto screaming in agony as his knee bent the wrong way, still fresh in her mind after all these years. "I said no." Lucas felt the familiar disappointment settle in his chest. He looked down at his worn-out shoes, now even more pitiful in the morning light. The duct tape he'd carefully applied was already peeling at the edges. "I have to go to school," he mumbled, grabbing his backpack. Roberto caught him at the door. "Son, sometimes a mother's fears come from love." He pressed something into Lucas's hand, the tournament flyer again. "But sometimes a father's hope comes from seeing the truth, and the truth is you have a gift." At school that day, Lucas couldn't concentrate. The tournament weighed on him, not just as an opportunity, but as a test of his loyalty. Should he obey his mother's wishes or follow his father's hope? During lunch, he sat alone, staring at the flyer. The tournament was just 2 days away. Miguel found him there, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong, Lucas? You look like someone stole your ball." Lucas explained the situation, the conflict between his parents, the opportunity to play, the chance to win money for new shoes. Miguel considered this. "My cousin works for the electric company. Maybe he can help turn your power back on before the tournament, just for the weekend." "Is that even possible?" Lucas asked. "Everything is possible with the right connections." Miguel grinned. "Come with me after school." Later that afternoon, while his mother was at work and his father was at a construction site, Lucas followed Miguel to the other side of town. The area was wealthier, with bigger houses and newer cars. "My cousin lives here," Miguel explained, pointing to a modest but well-kept home. "He'll help us." Miguel's cousin, a man in his 30s with kind eyes, agreed to restore the Mendez family's electricity for the weekend without cost. "For a talented kid like Lucas," he said, "it's the least I can do." That evening, when Luquinha returned home, his mother was amazed to find the lights working. "How?" she asked, bewildered. "I paid the bill," Lucas lied, the guilt weighing on him as heavily as the tournament flyer hidden in his pocket. Teresa hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, mijo. Now I can prepare a proper dinner." As Lucas lay in bed that night, staring at his ceiling, now illuminated by working lights, he made a decision. He would play in the tournament, with or without his mother's permission. He would win that money, not just for new shoes, but to help his family. And maybe, just maybe, to make his father's dream live again through him. Meanwhile, Teresa sat at the kitchen table, the tournament flyer in her hands. Roberto had left it deliberately for her to find. She traced the outline of the cash prize with her finger, thinking of the electricity that wouldn't be there on Monday when the temporary connection expired, thinking of the bills that would still need to be paid, the shoes her son still needed, the dreams she feared but couldn't deny. "I'm sorry," she whispered to herself, folding the flyer and hiding it in her pocket, just as her son had hidden his. "I'm just so afraid of losing another one to that damn game." But in her heart, Teresa knew the game wasn't the problem. The problem was that once you love something as much as Roberto had loved soccer, and as much as Lucas was starting to, the fear of losing it could be more crippling than any tackle, any injury, any broken dream. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that seemed to mock poverty and celebrate wealth in equal measure. Lucas woke before anyone else in the house, his stomach knotted with conflict. Today was the tournament. His father had slipped him the registration form already filled out the night before. "I'll handle your mother," Roberto had whispered. "Just be at the park by 9. But as Lucas tiptoed past his parents' bedroom, he heard something that made him freeze, muffled sobs, his mother's voice raw with emotion. "I can't lose him too, Roberto. I can't watch another person I love destroy themselves for this game. Teresa, mi amor, he's not going to get hurt. It's just a neighborhood tournament. It always starts that way, just like with you. First it was neighborhood games, then it was the local club, then semi-pro, then the injury that took everything." Lucas pressed his back against the wall, his heart thumping painfully in his chest. He'd never heard his mother this distraught. "This is different," Roberto insisted. "Lucas has something special, something I never had. He doesn't just play the game, he understands it, feels it. And what happens when some rich kid with proper cleats slides into him? When his knee bends the wrong way like yours did? We don't even have health insurance, Roberto." There was a long silence, and Lucas could imagine his father's face, that mixture of pain and pride that always appeared when soccer was mentioned. "I promised I wouldn't let him play," Teresa continued, her voice breaking. "But I know you've already given him the registration, haven't you?" Lucas didn't wait to hear his father's response. He slipped out the front door, tournament registration clutched in his sweaty hand, guilt and excitement warring in his chest. At the dirt field where the tournament was being held, dozens of boys were already warming up. Most wore proper soccer cleats. Some even had matching uniforms. Lucas looked down at his worn tennis shoes, the duct tape now reinforced with extra layers he'd applied last night. Miguel arrived a few minutes later, carrying an extra water bottle for Lucas. "Your mom okay with this?" he asked, eyeing the registration in Lucas's hand. Lucas shrugged, avoiding his friend's eyes. "My dad's handling it." Miguel knew enough not to press further. "Well, you're here now, let's warm up." The tournament organizer, a heavy-set man with a clipboard, frowned when Lucas handed in his registration. "You need proper footwear, kid. Those shoes won't cut it." "They're all I have," Lucas said, chin raised despite the humiliation burning his cheeks. The man looked him over, then sighed. "Your funeral. Field 3, starting in 20 minutes. Lucas's team was a hastily assembled group of neighborhood kids, none with formal training. They faced a team from the wealthier part of town in the first round, boys with expensive cleats and professional-looking uniforms. The whistle blew, and immediately Lucas knew they were outmatched physically. The other team was bigger, stronger, better equipped, but within minutes it became clear that none of them moved with the instinctive grace that Lucas possessed. He danced around defenders, created passing lanes where none seemed to exist, took shots that curved beautifully into the corners of the goal. By halftime, despite being the smallest player on the field, Lucas had scored twice and assisted once. His team led 3-2. As he gulped water on the sidelines, Lucas spotted a familiar SUV parking nearby. His heart sank when he saw his mother emerging from the passenger side, her face a storm of worry and anger. Behind the wheel was his uncle, Roberto's wealthy brother whom they rarely saw. "She called him," Miguel whispered, following Lucas's gaze. "Your uncle." Before Lucas could respond, the referee blew the whistle for the second half. He jogged back onto the field, trying to ignore his mother's presence, trying to focus only on the ball, the game, the opportunity to win that prize money. But everything changed 10 minutes into the second half. A defender from the other team, frustrated by Lucas's skill, slid in hard. His cleats caught Lucas's ankle, and Lucas went down, pain shooting up his leg. The field fell silent. In that moment, Lucas heard his mother's cry, a sound of such raw fear that it cut through everything else. He saw her running toward him, Roberto trying to hold her back. "I'm okay," Lucas called out, forcing himself to stand despite the searing pain. He tested his weight on the ankle. It hurt, but nothing was broken. "I'm okay, Mama." Teresa stopped, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Roberto approached the sideline, his expression a battle between concern and hope. "Can you play?" he asked quietly. Lucas nodded, though his ankle throbbed with each heartbeat. "I have to." The referee awarded Lucas's team a free kick. As he lined up to take it, Lucas saw his mother being comforted by his uncle, who was watching the game with unexpected interest. Lucas took a deep breath, pushed the pain aside, and struck the ball. It soared over the wall of defenders and dipped perfectly into the top corner, 4-2. But the celebration was short-lived. The other team, more determined now, scored twice in quick succession, 4-4, with only minutes remaining. Then, disaster struck. Lucas, pushing himself despite the pain, collided with an opponent while jumping for a header. Both boys crashed to the ground. The other boy bounced up immediately, but Lucas lay still, the wind knocked completely out of him. Teresa couldn't take it anymore. She broke free from her brother-in-law and ran onto the field. "That's enough," she screamed, kneeling beside Lucas. "The game is over for you." "No, Mama," Lucas gasped, struggling to sit up. "Please, we're tied. We can still win." "I don't care about winning. I care about you not ending up like your father." The words hung in the air between them. Around them, players from both teams stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. The referee approached, asking if Lucas needed medical attention. "I'm fine," Lucas insisted, though his ribs ached and his ankle throbbed. "Please, Mama, 5 more minutes, that's all." Teresa looked into her son's eyes, Roberto's eyes, filled with the same passion, the same determination she'd seen years ago, and she knew with a sinking feeling that she couldn't stop this, couldn't protect him from the thing he loved, any more than she could have protected Roberto. 5 minutes, she whispered, helping him to his feet. "And if you get hurt again, I'll never forgive your father or myself." As Teresa walked back to the sideline, Lucas noticed someone else watching the game, a man in an expensive suit, leaning against the black SUV that had passed their house the other day. Carlos Vega, the businessman Miguel had pointed out. The referee's whistle brought Lucas back to reality. 5 minutes to win. 5 minutes to prove to his mother that sometimes dreams were worth the risk. As the final minutes ticked down, Lucas played through the pain, his worn shoes slipping on the grass, his injured ankles screaming with each step. But still, he played with a grace that had even the opposing parents watching in admiration. In the final minute, with the score still tied, Lucas made a desperate run toward the goal. A defender slid in, and for a heart-stopping moment, it looked like history would repeat itself. But Lucas jumped, avoiding the tackle, and as he landed, he saw his chance. The goalkeeper was out of position. One shot, one moment. Everything his mother feared, and everything his father hoped for, wrapped into a single opportunity. Time seemed to slow as Lucas lined up his shot. The goalkeeper, scrambling to get back into position, dove desperately. Lucas struck the ball with the inside of his foot, not for power but for precision. The ball curled beautifully, sailing just beyond the goalkeeper's fingertips and into the bottom corner of the net. The whistle blew. Game over, 5-4. His teammates mobbed him, lifting him onto their shoulders, despite his protests about his injured ankle. Through the crowd, Lucas caught glimpses of his father's face beaming with pride and his mother's, a complex mixture of relief, worry, and something that might have been acceptance. Later, as the tournament organizers handed him the MVP certificate and the coveted envelope containing $100, Lucas could hardly believe it. He'd done it. He'd won the money they needed. Teresa approached slowly, her eyes red from crying. "You played beautifully," she admitted, her voice barely audible, "just like your father used to." It was the highest compliment she could have given him. Roberto hugged his son so tightly that Lucas's ribs, already sore from the earlier collision, ached in protest. "I knew you could do it," he whispered. "I've always known." As they walked toward the parking lot, Lucas was surprised to see his uncle waiting by his expensive car. Eduardo Mendez, Roberto's younger brother who had built a successful construction company while Roberto's soccer dreams collapsed, stood awkwardly, as if unsure of his welcome. "That was quite a performance," Eduardo said, nodding to Lucas. Then to Roberto, "Your boy has talent." Roberto stiffened. The brothers hadn't spoken properly in years, not since Eduardo had offered Roberto what felt like charity after his injury. "Yes, he does. Teresa called me, Eduardo explained. She was worried. I didn't think you'd come, Teresa admitted. Eduardo shrugged. Family is family. He looked at Lucas's taped-up shoes, then at the envelope in the boy's hand. What will you do with your winnings? Before Lucas could answer, his father spoke. New soccer shoes, proper ones. Eduardo nodded, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Well, congratulations, Lucas. Maybe next time I'll see you play from the beginning. As Eduardo drove away, Lucas noticed Carlos Vega still watching from a distance, talking on his phone while occasionally glancing in their direction. Who's that man? Teresa asked, following Lucas's gaze. Nobody, Lucas said quickly, not wanting to fuel his mother's worries with talk of soccer scouts or club connections. Just someone watching the games. That night, after a celebration dinner that stretched their remaining groceries to the limit, Lucas sat on his bed staring at the $100 bill. In the darkness of his room, illuminated only by the temporarily restored electricity that would likely be gone by Monday, it seemed to glow with possibility. Tomorrow, he would go to the sports store and buy his first real pair of soccer cleats. The thought made his heart race with excitement. Luquinha, his mother's voice came from the doorway. She sat beside him on the bed, wincing slightly at its creaking protest. Your ankle, is it bad? Lucas shook his head. Just a small sprain. It'll be better in a few days. Teresa nodded, her eyes falling on the money in his hands. You know, that money could help us get the electricity back permanently, or buy groceries for 2 weeks. The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Lucas looked down at his worn-out shoes by the door, then at the soccer posters covering his walls, then back at the $100 bill. I need proper shoes, Maman, to play better, to maybe get noticed by a real team someday. Teresa's shoulders slumped slightly, but she nodded. I know, it's your money, you earned it. She kissed his forehead and left, closing the door behind her. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Guilt warred with excitement in Lucas's mind. He had earned the money, yes, but his family needed it desperately. Sunday morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Lucas's conflicted mood. His ankle throbbed as he dressed, a reminder of yesterday's victory and the price his body had paid for it. I'll take you to buy those cleats, Roberto announced at breakfast, his eyes bright with anticipation. There's a good sporting goods store downtown. Teresa said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. She was trying, Lucas knew, trying to accept that her son had inherited his father's passion, trying not to let her fears control him. But the worry lines around her eyes had deepened. Downtown was a different world from their neighborhood. Clean streets, fancy shops, people in expensive clothes hurrying about their business. Lucas and Roberto, in their worn clothes, stood out, like sore thumbs. As they waited at a crosswalk, Lucas spotted a familiar black SUV parked outside a cafe. Carlos Vega was sitting at an outdoor table, talking with someone Lucas couldn't see clearly. As if sensing Lucas's gaze, Vega looked up, made eye contact, and nodded slightly before returning to his conversation. That man was at the tournament, Lucas said to his father. Miguel says he's connected to the Tigres club. Roberto followed his son's gaze, eyebrows raising in recognition. Carlos Vega. He sponsors youth development for several teams. He squeezed Lucas's shoulder. Don't get your hopes up, son. Men like that, notice 1 in 1,000 kids. They continued, toward the sporting goods store, but fate had other plans. As they passed a narrow alley, a commotion erupted behind them. Lucas turned to see Vega arguing with a younger man who stormed off, bumping hard into Vega as he passed. In that brief collision, something fell from Vega's pocket without him noticing. A leather wallet, landing silently on the sidewalk. Sir, Lucas called out, but Vega had already turned back to the cafe, his phone ringing, demanding his attention. Lucas walked back and picked up the wallet. It was expensive, the leather soft and supple in his hands. He flipped it open, curious despite himself. Inside was a stack of bills, far more than $100. 500? 1,000? Lucas had never seen so much money in one place. Yuki. Should return it, Roberto said suddenly beside him, his voice carefully neutral. Lucas nodded immediately. Of course he should return it, but as he took a step toward the cafe, a thought stopped him cold. With this much money, he could buy the best cleats in the store, and there would still be enough left to pay the electric bill, to buy groceries, to ease the worry lines around his mother's eyes. No one had seen him pick up the wallet. Vega probably wouldn't even miss the money, rich as he was. The thought burned in Lucas's mind like a fever. Take just some of the money, not all of it. just enough to help his family and still get the cleats he deserved. Lucas, his father's voice seemed to come from far away. Son, what are you thinking? Lucas looked up at his father, then back at the wallet in his hands. The choice before him wasn't just about money or soccer shoes. It was about who he was, who he wanted to be. Lucas began, his voice catching in his throat as the wallet seemed to grow heavier in his hands. I should return it, Lucas finally said, the words feeling heavy in his mouth, but his hands didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the bills visible inside the wallet. Roberto placed a hand on his son's shoulder. It's your decision, Lucas. But remember, the choices we make when no one is watching define who we really are. That's when they heard Miguel's voice calling from across the street. Lucas, hey Lucas! The moment of decision was interrupted as Miguel jogged over, grinning widely. I knew I'd find you here today. Did you bring your tournament money? The new Adidas Predators just came in and they're awesome. Lucas quickly closed the wallet and slipped it into his pocket, the weight of it like a stone against his thigh. Yeah, I have the money, he said, avoiding his father's eyes. I need to make a quick call about a job, Roberto said, his expression unreadable. I'll meet you boys inside the store in 15 minutes. As his father walked away, phone in hand, Lucas felt the wallet burning in his pocket. Miguel was already heading toward the sporting goods store, chattering excitedly about the cleats they'd seen in the window last week. You coming? Miguel called back, noticing Lucas's hesitation. Lucas glanced toward the cafe where Carlos Vega sat, still engrossed in his phone call, unaware of his missing wallet. Then he looked at the store where gleaming new cleats awaited. His $100 would buy decent shoes, but nothing like the top-tier cleats the serious players wore. With a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff, Lucas followed Miguel into the store. Inside, the walls were lined with soccer cleats of every color and brand. Lucas had never been in a place like this, had only seen these shoes in magazines and on the feet of wealthy kids. His fingers traced the pristine leather of a display model, the studs on the bottom perfect and uniform, nothing like his worn-out duct-taped tennis shoes. These, Miguel said, pointing to a pair of bright blue Adidas Predators. These are the ones all the pros are wearing now. Lucas checked the price tag and his heart sank. $175, far more than his tournament winnings. But the wallet in his pocket contained more than enough. Can I help you boys? A store clerk approached, eyeing their worn clothes with barely concealed skepticism. We're just looking, Miguel said quickly. Actually, Lucas heard himself say, I'd like to try these in size 7, please. The clerk raised an eyebrow, but went to the back to check. While he was gone, Miguel stared at Lucas. Those are way more than $100, he whispered. Where'd you get the extra money? Lucas couldn't meet his friend's eyes. I just have it, okay? The clerk returned with a shoebox. You're in luck. Last pair in this size. When Lucas tried them on, it was like his feet had finally found their home. The cleats fit perfectly, supporting his arches, gripping the floor with authority. He took a few steps, feeling the difference immediately. I'll take them, he said, heart pounding. At the register, Lucas opened the wallet just enough to extract $200 bills, keeping the rest hidden. The clerk's demeanor changed instantly at the sight of the money. Excellent choice, young man, he said, counting out the change. Outside the store, shopping bag in hand, Lucas felt simultaneously elated and sick. Miguel excitedly asked to see the cleats again, but Lucas's attention was drawn back to the cafe. Carlos Vega was now standing, patting his pockets with increasing urgency. He was discovering his wallet was missing. I have to go, Lucas said, abruptly. I'll see you later. What about your dad? Miguel asked, confused. Tell him I went home. Lucas hurried away, ducking down a side street to avoid being seen by Vega. His new cleats, bought with stolen money, felt like they were made of lead instead of leather. At home, he found his mother hanging laundry in the small backyard. She smiled when she saw him, a rare sight these days. Did you find good shoes, mijo? Lucas nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He handed her the shopping bag. Teresa pulled out the gleaming blue cleats and gasped. Lucas, these must have cost more than $100. There was a sale, he lied, the words bitter on his tongue. And I have enough left to help with the electric bill. He handed her the remaining cash from Vega's wallet. Over $700, Teresa's eyes widened. Lucas, where did you get this money? Did your father... No, Lucas said quickly. I had some saved, from birthdays and chores I did for neighbors. His mother looked skeptical but didn't press further. The relief in her eyes at the sight of so much money was painful to witness. "This will pay the electric bill for months," she whispered, "and the rent, and groceries." That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Carlos Vega searching for his wallet, saw his father's face when he'd chosen not to return it, saw the disappointment that would come when the truth inevitably surfaced. The next morning, his father was unusually quiet at breakfast. He'd said nothing about Lucas disappearing from the store yesterday, nothing about the expensive new cleats sitting by the door, nothing about the mysterious money that had Teresa smiling for the first time in weeks. "There's another game today," Roberto finally said. "At the park. You should break in your new cleats." Lucas nodded, unable to meet his father's eyes. The thought of wearing the stolen cleats made his stomach turn, but what choice did he have now? At the park, kids were already playing on the dusty field. Lucas sat on a bench, slowly lacing up his new Predators, each pull of the laces a reminder of his betrayal of his own values. "Nice shoes," said a voice beside him. Lucas looked up to see Carlos Vega standing there, sunglasses hiding his eyes, his expression unreadable. Lucas's blood ran cold. Had Vega somehow tracked him down? Did he know? "Thank you," Lucas stammered. "Mind if I sit?" Without waiting for an answer, Vega settled beside him on the bench. "I saw you play in the tournament yesterday. You have exceptional talent." Lucas stared at his new cleats, shame burning through him. "Thank you, sir. Talent is a gift," Vega continued, watching the other kids play. "But character is a choice. A young man with talent but no character will never reach his full potential." Lucas could barely breathe. He knew. Somehow Vega knew what he had done. "I lost my wallet yesterday," Vega said casually, "after watching you play. Strange coincidence, isn't it? To lose something so valuable after witnessing something of equal value." Lucas felt tears welling in his eyes. His mother's smile, his father's pride, the electricity in their home, all built on a lie, on a theft, on a moment of weakness. "These cleats," Lucas whispered, his voice breaking. "I bought them with your money." Vega nodded slowly. "I suspected as much." "I'm sorry," Lucas said, the tears flowing freely now. "I've never stolen anything before. My family needed the money, and I wanted the shoes so badly, and you made a mistake," Vega finished for him. "The question now is, what will you do to correct it?" Lucas looked up, meeting Vega's eyes for the first time. "I'll return everything, the cleats, the money, all of it, and I'll find a way to pay back what we've already spent." A faint smile touched Vega's lips. "Perhaps there's another solution, one that tests whether your character matches your talent." Lucas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do you mean?" "Play," Vega said simply, nodding toward the field. "Play as if your future depends on it, because it might." Lucas stared at Carlos Vega, confusion mingling with the shame still burning in his chest. "Play, that's it?" "That's everything," Vega replied, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "I need to see if your talent is worth my investment, despite your momentary lapse in judgment." Lucas swallowed hard. "I don't understand." "It's simple. I've arranged a scrimmage match. 1/2, 45 minutes. Your neighborhood against the youth academy team I sponsor. Show me what you can do with those new cleats you were so desperate to have." Lucas's heart raced. The youth academy team was composed of the best young players in the city, kids who had been training professionally for years. "But that's not a fair match. Life isn't fair," Vega interrupted. "Success comes to those who can rise above unfair circumstances." He checked his watch. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you gather your friends." As Vega walked away, Lucas sat frozen, the weight of the stolen cleats suddenly unbearable on his feet. He had to tell Miguel, had to explain everything. He found his friend practicing shots against the chain-link fence. "Miguel," Lucas called, his voice catching. "I need to tell you something." The story spilled out. The wallet, the theft, the confrontation with Vega. Miguel's expression shifted from disbelief to disappointment. "That's not you, Lucas," he said finally. "You're not a thief." "I know," Lucas whispered, tears threatening again. "But I did it. And now Vega wants us to play against the academy team." Miguel's eyes widened. "Those guys are like semi-pro. They train every day with real coaches. He wants to see if my talent is worth his investment, whatever that means." Miguel placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Then we show him it is. I'll round up the guys." Within 15 minutes, Miguel had assembled their usual group of neighborhood players, boys who played for fun without training or proper equipment. Lucas explained the situation, leaving out only the part about the theft. They would play, he told them, against the academy team, for pride, for the neighborhood. When the academy team arrived in their matching uniforms, stepping out of an air-conditioned bus with their professional coach, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. They looked like what they were, young athletes, with every advantage. Roberto arrived just as the teams were warming up, confusion evident on his face. "Lucas, what is this? Who are these players?" Before Lucas could answer, Carlos Vega appeared at Roberto's side. "Mr. Mendez, I presume?" "I'm Carlos Vega. I've arranged this little exhibition match to assess your son's abilities." Roberto stiffened. "My son plays for fun, not for assessment." "Every player is always being assessed," Vega replied smoothly. "The question is whether they know it or not." As the teams took their positions, Lucas felt the enormity of what was happening crash over him. This wasn't just about soccer anymore. It was about redemption, about proving his character matched his talent. The referee, a professional one brought by Vega, blew the whistle, and immediately the academy team took control. Their passes were crisp, their positioning perfect. Lucas and his friends were quickly overwhelmed, chasing shadows as the academy team moved the ball effortlessly around them. By the 20-minute mark, they were down 3-0, and Lucas hadn't even touched the ball more than a handful of times. His expensive new cleats, far from making him a better player, seemed to be weighing him down. They felt foreign on his feet, like they belonged to someone else. During a water break, Lucas sat apart from his teammates, head in his hands. His father approached, kneeling beside him. "The shoes are bothering you," Roberto observed quietly. Lucas nodded miserably. "They don't feel right. Nothing feels right." Roberto glanced toward Vega, who was watching them intently from the sideline. "Why is this man so interested in you, Lucas? What aren't you telling me?" The moment had come. Lucas couldn't lie anymore, not to his father, not to himself. In halting words, he confessed everything, finding the wallet, taking the money, buying the cleats, being discovered by Vega. Roberto listened in silence, his expression growing more pained with each revelation. When Lucas finished, he expected anger, disappointment. Instead, his father simply asked, "And what have you learned?" "That I made a terrible mistake," Lucas whispered. "That I betrayed everything you and Maman taught me about honesty and integrity. That I'm not the person I thought I was." Roberto shook his head slowly. "No, son. You learned that even good people can make bad choices when they're desperate. The question is what you do next." He picked up Lucas's old, worn tennis shoes from where they lay discarded under the bench. "These shoes know who you are. They've been with you through every game, every practice. They're part of your journey." Lucas stared at the battered shoes, the duct tape now peeling at the edges. "The player makes the shoes, Lucas," Roberto said softly, "not the other way around." The referee blew his whistle, calling the players back to the field. Lucas looked at his father, then at the expensive cleats on his feet, then at his old shoes, in Roberto's hands. Without hesitation, he unlaced the Predators and removed them. They were beautiful, perfect, and tainted with shame. He pulled on his old, comfortable tennis shoes, feeling instantly more himself. "What are you doing?" Miguel asked in disbelief. "Being myself," Lucas replied, jogging back onto the field. "Carlos." Vega frowned from the sideline, clearly perplexed by the shoe change, but Lucas didn't care what Vega thought anymore. This game was no longer about impressing a wealthy businessman or securing an investment. It was about remembering who he was. The second half began, and immediately something was different. Lucas moved with newfound freedom, his old shoes like extensions of his feet. He anticipated passes, created space where none seemed to exist, threaded the ball through impossibly narrow gaps between defenders. 10 minutes in, he scored their first goal, a brilliant solo effort that left 3 academy defenders in his wake. 5 minutes later, he assisted Miguel for a second. The academy team, initially dismissive, began to mark him closely, sometimes double-teaming him, but Lucas was playing with joy now, unburdened by the weight of his deception. Even when he was tightly marked, he found ways to impact the game, setting up teammates, creating chances. With 5 minutes remaining, they had somehow clawed their way back to 3-3. The academy coach was shouting furiously at his players. Vega was leaning forward in his seat, all pretense of casual interest gone. In the final minute, Lucas received the ball near midfield. 2 defenders closed in on him. In his expensive cleats, he might have tried a fancy move to get past them. But in his trusty tennis shoes, he did the simple thing. passed to Miguel and immediately sprinted forward, trusting his friend would return the ball when the moment was right. Miguel didn't let him down. His perfectly timed pass split the defense, and Lucas was through one-on-one with the goalkeeper. The moment of truth had arrived. Time seemed to slow as Lucas faced the goalkeeper. The academy team's keeper was tall, trained, confident, everything Lucas was not supposed to be. The boy spread his arms wide, making himself as big as possible, his eyes locked on Lucas's feet. Lucas could hear his father's voice in his head. The player makes the shoes. He could feel the familiar comfort of his worn tennis shoes, the duct tape rough against his skin. With a clarity that surprised even himself, Lucas saw the play unfold before it happened. The goalkeeper was anticipating a shot to the left corner, Lucas's strongest. So instead he did something unexpected. He slowed down almost to a stop. The keeper, confused by the change of pace, took a hesitant step forward. That was all Lucas needed. With a delicate touch, he chipped the ball, not with power, but with precision, just over the keeper's outstretched fingers. The ball seemed to hang in the air forever before nestling into the back of the net. To 3. The neighborhood team erupted in celebration. Miguel sprinted to Lucas, tackling him to the ground as their teammates piled on. For a moment, Lucas forgot about Vega, about the stolen money, about everything except the pure joy of the game. When he finally extracted himself from the pile, Lucas found Vega standing at the sideline, an unreadable expression on his face. Roberto stood a few paces behind, pride warring with concern in his eyes. The final whistle blew moments later. The academy team trudged off, frustrated and disbelieving. Their coach was berating them loudly about complacency and underestimating opponents. "Come with me," Vega said to Lucas, his voice carrying no hint of whether he was impressed or angry. Roberto stepped forward. "My son goes nowhere without me." Vega nodded. "Of course, Mr. Mendez. Your presence would be valuable." They followed. Vega to his car, where the businessman leaned against the hood, studying Lucas with calculated intensity. "Why did you change shoes?" he asked finally. Lucas met his gaze steadily. "Because those expensive cleats weren't mine." "Not really. They were bought with stolen money. Your money. They don't represent who I am or who I want to be." A faint smile touched Vega's lips. "And who do you want to be, Lucas Mendez?" "A good player, a good son, a good person." Lucas swallowed hard. "I made a mistake taking your wallet. I want to make it right. I'll return the cleats, and my parents and I will work to pay back every cent I took." Roberto placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder, squeezing gently. "We will make this right, Mr. Vega. You have my word." Vega pushed himself off the car and paced, slowly, hands clasped behind his back. The normal response would be to call the police. Theft is a serious offense. Lucas felt his blood turn to ice. Jail? Would he go to jail? What would his mother say? But, Vega continued, normal responses are for normal circumstances, and what I witnessed today was anything but normal. He turned to face Lucas directly. "That last goal. Explain your thinking." Confused by the sudden change of topic, Lucas stammered, I just saw the keeper was expecting me to shoot hard to the left, so I did something different." "You read the game. You adapted. You controlled the moment rather than letting the moment control you." Vega nodded appreciatively. "Those are rare qualities in a player so young." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Roberto. "I have a proposition for you and your family, but not here. Come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Both of you, and Mrs. Mendez as well. We have much to discuss." With that cryptic invitation, Vega got into his car and drove away, leaving Lucas and Roberto standing in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Lucas asked, his voice small. Roberto shook his head, staring at the business card. "I don't know, son, but we need to tell your mother everything before tomorrow." The walk home was the longest of Lucas's life. Each step seemed to weigh him down as he imagined his mother's reaction to his confession. Teresa, who had sacrificed so much, who had worked so hard to instill values of honesty and dignity, how would she look at him now? When they arrived home, the electricity was on, paid for with stolen money. Teresa was cooking dinner, humming, softly, more relaxed than Lucas had seen her in months. "My boys," she greeted them cheerfully. "I bought groceries today, real groceries. Had I paid the rent in advance, things are finally looking up." The words were daggers in Lucas's heart. He looked at his father, silently pleading for help. Roberto nodded encouragingly. "Teresa, we need to talk. All of us." They sat at the kitchen table, the happy atmosphere evaporating as Lucas, voice breaking, confessed everything. The wallet, the theft, the expensive cleats, the confrontation with Vega, and finally, the invitation to meet tomorrow. Teresa's face went from confusion to shock to profound disappointment. "Lucas," she whispered, "how could you? After everything we taught you." "I'm sorry, Mama," Lucas said, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to help us. I wanted those cleats so badly. I thought it would change everything." "And did it?" she asked, her voice hard. "Did stealing make you a better player? A better person?" Lucas shook his head miserably. "No, it made me worse. It made me someone I don't want to be." Teresa stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, darkness had fallen, but the streetlights were on, illuminating their small yard. "We have to return everything," she said finally. "The shoes, the money, whatever's left. And we have to find a way to pay back what we've spent." "We will," Roberto assured her, showing her Vega's card. "Tomorrow we meet with him. He said he has a proposition." Teresa's laugh was hollow. "A proposition? Our son stole from him, Roberto. The proposition will be, pay me back or I call the police." That night, Lucas lay awake in bed, listening to his parents' hushed voices in the next room. He caught fragments. Sell the TV. Ask Eduardo for help. Second job. They were trying to figure out how to repay Vega, how to save their son from the consequences of his actions. The weight of what he'd done pressed down on Lucas like a physical force. His talent on the field meant nothing if he couldn't be trusted. Off it, the memory of that perfect chip shot, of the ball sailing over the goalkeeper's fingers, now felt tainted, hollow. As dawn broke, Lucas made a decision. Before his parents awoke, he crept out of the house, the stolen cleats in a bag. He would return them to the store, explain that they were purchased with stolen money. Maybe they would refund enough that his parents wouldn't have to sacrifice. Everything to make amends for his mistake. The morning air was cool against his face as he walked downtown, rehearsing what he would say. So focused was he on his mission that he didn't notice the black SUV pulling alongside him until Vega's voice broke through his thoughts. "A bit early for a shopping trip, isn't it, Lucas?" Lucas froze, the bag with the stolen cleats suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Carlos Vega sat in his idling SUV, the window rolled down, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. "I was going to return these," Lucas said quickly, holding up the bag, "to the store, to try to get some of your money back." Vega studied him for a long moment. "Get in." "But my parents, I'll have my assistant call them, get in." Reluctantly, Lucas climbed into the passenger seat. The leather interior smelled expensive, like nothing he'd ever experienced before. Vega pulled away from the curb, driving in silence for several minutes. "Where are we going?" Lucas finally asked, his voice small. "To see what you're really fighting for," Vega replied cryptically. They drove through neighborhoods Lucas had never visited, areas where the houses grew larger, the streets cleaner, the cars more expensive. Eventually, they turned into a gated community, passing a security checkpoint where the guard nodded respectfully to Vega. Lucas's eyes widened as they pulled up to an enormous house, 3 stories of gleaming windows and pristine white stone. It looked like something from a movie, not a place where real people lived. "My home," Vega said simply, parking in a circular driveway. "Come." Inside, the house was even more impressive. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than Lucas's entire neighborhood. They passed through a series of rooms, each more opulent than the last, until they reached what appeared to be Vega's office. Vega gestured to a chair. "Sit." As Lucas perched nervously on the edge of the seat, Vega opened a drawer and removed a familiar leather wallet. Lucas's heart sank. Here it was, the moment of reckoning. "Do you know why I let you take this?" Vega asked. Lucas blinked in confusion. "You let me?" Vega's lips curved into a faint smile. "I've been watching you for months, Lucas. Ever since a scout of mine mentioned a barefoot boy playing like a prodigy in the slums." "I wasn't barefoot," Lucas protested weakly. "Might as well have been with those worn-out shoes." Vega settled into his chair. "I wanted to see what you would do when presented with temptation, when given an easy way out of your circumstances. Character reveals itself in moments of opportunity and pressure." Lucas stared at the floor, shame burning through him. "And I failed the test." "Did you?" Vega stood and walked to a wall covered in framed photographs. "Initially, yes. You gave in to temptation. But then something remarkable happened. You recognized your mistake. You tried to make amends. You chose your battered old shoes over the stolen cleats, even knowing it might cost you your chance to impress me. He gestured to one of the photos, a boy not much older than Lucas, wearing a professional soccer uniform standing beside Vega. This was another young player I discovered years ago. Enormous talent, perhaps even more natural ability than you. But when success came, when the money started flowing, he imploded. Drugs, women, partying. His talent meant nothing because his character couldn't sustain it. Lucas looked up, understanding dawning. You were testing me. I invest in people, not just players. I needed to know if you were worth the risk. Vega returned to his desk. Yesterday's game confirmed your talent. Your actions this morning confirmed your character. Hope flickered in Lucas's chest, quickly extinguished by reality. But I still stole from you. My parents are trying to figure out how to pay you back. Vega waved a dismissive hand. The money is irrelevant to me. What matters is what you've learned. He leaned forward. So tell me, Lucas Mendez, what have you learned? Lucas thought carefully before answering. That shortcuts don't work. That who you are matters more than what you have. That I never want to see the disappointment in my mother's eyes again. Vega nodded, apparently satisfied. Good. He reached into another drawer and pulled out a document. This is what I wanted to discuss with your family today, but since you're here, you might as well see it first. He slid the paper across the desk. Lucas read it slowly, his English limited but sufficient to grasp the main points. It was a contract. AC's youth development contract with Tigres, the professional team whose posters covered his bedroom walls. The terms included a monthly stipend, education costs, training with professional coaches, and a signing bonus of $5,000. Lucas's hands trembled as he looked up. Is this real? Very real. But there are conditions. Vega held up a finger. First, education remains your priority. No training if your grades drop. A second finger. Second, your family moves to a better neighborhood, closer to the training facilities. A third finger. And most importantly, you remember this moment, this feeling, this lesson about who you are and who you want to become. Lucas stared at the contract, unable to process what was happening. His dream, the impossible dream of playing for Tigres, suddenly within reach. The thought of telling his parents, of seeing their reaction, brought fresh tears to his eyes. Why me, he asked finally, after what I did? Because talent like yours appears once in a generation. Because you've shown you can learn from mistakes, and because I believe you have what it takes to go all the way, not just skill but resilience. Vega glanced at his watch. Now we should return to your home. Your parents will be worried. The drive back passed in a blur, Lucas clutching the contract like it might dissolve if he loosened his grip. When they pulled up outside his house, he saw his parents on the porch, their faces tight with worry. Lucas, Teresa cried, running to the car. Where have you been? We've been so worried. Roberto approached more cautiously, his eyes on Vega. As the businessman emerged from the SUV, I apologize for the alarm, Mrs. Mendez, Vega said smoothly. I happened to encounter Lucas this morning and took the opportunity to show him something important, something I'd like to discuss with all of you. Teresa's expression hardened. We know everything, Mr. Vega, about the wallet, the money. We're prepared to make restitution, even if it takes years. That won't be necessary, Vega replied. Your son has already made amends in the way that matters most. But please, let's discuss this inside. For the next hour, Vega explained the contract, the opportunity, the conditions. Lucas watched his parents' expressions shift from suspicion to disbelief to cautious hope. This is too much, Teresa whispered, staring at the signing bonus amount. Why would you do this after what he did to you? Because I'm not investing in who he was yesterday, Vega said simply. I'm investing in who he'll become tomorrow. Roberto, who had been silently reading through the contract's fine print, finally looked up. And if he doesn't meet expectations, if he's not as good as you hope, then he still gets an education, a safer neighborhood, and a chance to find his path. Vega shrugged. Not every seedling grows into a champion tree, but they all deserve sunlight and water. Teresa took Lucas's hand in hers, her eyes searching his face. Is this what you want, mijo? To play soccer professionally? Even knowing the risks, the possibility of injury? Lucas looked into his mother's eyes, seeing in them all the worry, all the fears that had haunted her since Roberto's career-ending injury. He understood now why she had resisted his soccer dreams so fiercely, not because she didn't believe in him, but because she had already witnessed the heartbreak that could come from pinning everything on the fragile promise of athletic success. "Yes," Lucas said firmly, squeezing his mother's hand. "This is what I want more than anything, but only if you and Papa agree." Teresa looked to Roberto, who had been unusually quiet throughout Vega's presentation. As a former player himself, he understood both the incredible opportunity before them and the substantial risks. "The contract seems legitimate," Roberto said slowly, "but there are many stories of young talents who sign away their futures for empty promises." Vega nodded, seemingly appreciative of their caution. "A healthy skepticism is warranted. I encourage you to have a lawyer review the contract. At my expense, of course. We couldn't afford," Teresa began. "My brother is an attorney," Roberto interrupted. "Eduardo would do this for us." Vega stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Excellent. I'll give you 3 days to consult with him and make your decision." He handed Roberto a business card. "My private number. Call me when you've decided or if you have any questions." After Vega left, the small house seemed suddenly diminished, as if his presence had temporarily expanded its walls, and now they had contracted again. The three of them sat in stunned silence, the contract lying on the kitchen table between them, like some magical artifact that might disappear if they looked away. "Could this really be happening?" Teresa whispered, reaching out to touch the paper as if to verify its existence. Roberto ran a hand through his graying hair. "It seems too good to be true, especially after—" He trailed off, glancing at Lucas. "After—" "I stole from him," Lucas finished, the shame still fresh. "I don't deserve this." "Perhaps that's not for you to decide," Roberto said gently. "Perhaps Vega sees something in you worth believing in despite your mistake." Teresa stood abruptly. "I need to think and pray." She retreated to the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Later that evening, Roberto called his brother Eduardo. Their conversation was brief, tense with the weight of years of minimal contact. But Eduardo agreed to review the contract, asking them to bring it to his office the next morning. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. His mind raced with possibilities: playing for Tigres, training with professional coaches, moving to a better neighborhood. No more worrying about electricity being cut off or food running short. It seemed impossible that his life could change so dramatically, especially after he had made such a terrible mistake. But beneath the excitement lurked a darker fear. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he signed the contract, accepted Vega's money, uprooted his family, and then failed? The pressure would be immense, the expectations crushing. The next morning, the Mendez family dressed in their best clothes, which weren't very good at all, and took the bus to Eduardo's downtown law office. The receptionist eyed their worn attire with barely concealed disdain, but directed them to a conference room where Eduardo was waiting. Lucas had only met his uncle a handful of times. Eduardo was younger than Roberto, but looked older somehow. His face harder, his eyes colder, his posture rigid with self-importance. Success had not softened him. "So," Eduardo said after cursory greetings, examining the contract through expensive glasses, "my soccer star brother and his family need legal advice." The words carried a subtle, mocking tone that made Lucas's skin prickle with indignation. Roberto's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, allowing his brother to read through the document in silence. Teresa sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. After what seemed like an eternity, Eduardo set down the contract. "It's legitimate," he announced. "Actually quite generous compared to standard youth development deals. Vega must see exceptional potential." He looked directly at Lucas for the first time. "Or he's exceptionally foolish." "Eduardo," Roberto warned. "What?" "The boy should know what he's getting into." Eduardo leaned back in his chair. "This contract is no guarantee of success. For every kid signed to a youth program, perhaps 1 in 50 makes it to the professional level. The rest wash out, usually with injuries or when puberty fails to deliver the physical development they need. They end up with nothing. He knows." "The risks," Roberto said. "Does he?" Eduardo challenged. "Does he understand that you were the exceptional talent in our family, Roberto? The golden boy. And look how that turned out." The cruel words hung in the air. Lucas glanced at his father, expecting anger, but saw only a profound sadness in his eyes. "If you're quite finished," Teresa said, her voice like ice, "we'd appreciate your professional opinion on the contract itself. Is there anything we should be concerned about?" Eduardo had the grace to look somewhat abashed. The contract is solid. The education provisions are particularly strong. Vega is obligated to pay for schooling regardless of Lucas's athletic development. The signing bonus is clean. No hidden recapture clauses. The monthly stipend is modest but fair. He tapped a finger on one section. This part about required relocation, however, we understand that part, Roberto interjected. We're prepared. To move if we sign, Eduardo studied his brother. You'd leave the neighborhood. After all these years of refusing my help, my offers to get you out of there. This is different, Roberto said quietly. This is for Lucas. Something shifted in Eduardo's expression, a softening, perhaps even a grudging respect. Well then, as your attorney, I advise that this contract is favorable and contains no concerning clauses or hidden traps. He pushed the document back across the table. As your brother, I hope this works out better for your son than it did for you. The family thanked Eduardo and left, Roberto noticeably subdued after the encounter. They walked several blocks in. Silence before Teresa spoke. Your brother is a bitter man, she observed. Roberto nodded. Success without happiness. It happens. When they returned home, a surprise awaited them. Miguel was sitting on their front steps, his expression somber. Lucas, he called, jumping to his feet. Is it true? Are you signing with Tigres? News traveled fast in their small community. Lucas explained the situation as best he could, watching Miguel's face transform from excitement to understanding, to a complex mixture of happiness and loss. You'll be leaving then, Miguel said finally. Moving away. If we sign, Lucas nodded. But nothing's decided yet. Miguel forced a smile. You have to sign. This is everything you've ever wanted. That evening, the family sat around their small kitchen table for a decision that would change their lives forever. Teresa had prepared a special meal, stretching their limited resources to create a sense of occasion. Before we decide, she said, looking at Lucas intently, I need to know you understand what this means. The pressure, the expectations, the work required. This isn't just about playing the game you love anymore. This becomes a responsibility. To Mr. Vega, to the team, to us. Lucas nodded solemnly. I understand, Mama, and you must promise me something, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. Promise me that if, she glanced at Roberto, if you get injured, if things don't work out as we hope, you won't let it destroy you. You'll remember that you are more than the game. I promise, Lucas whispered, understanding that her concern came from watching Roberto struggle after his career ended. The depression, the lost identity, the years of trying to rebuild a life beyond soccer. Roberto reached across the table, taking one of Teresa's hands and one of Lucas's. Then I think we have our answer. The next morning, they called Carlos Vega. 3 days later, they signed the contract in his opulent office, Lucas's hand trembling slightly as he put pen to paper. Vega handed Roberto an envelope containing the signing bonus, more money than the family had ever seen at once. As they left Vega's office, stepping into the bright sunlight of possibility, Teresa abruptly stopped on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. Mamai? Lucas asked, alarmed. What's wrong? She pulled him into a fierce embrace. Nothing's wrong, mijo. For the first time in so long, things might actually be right. She looked up at Roberto, who wrapped his arms around them both. But remember, no matter what happens with soccer, we are a family first, always. Over his mother's shoulder, Lucas watched a man in a Tigres training uniform approach, his new coach, coming to discuss next steps. The first step on a long, uncertain journey. I won't let you down, Lucas promised, holding his parents tight. Any of you. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. The Mendez family moved into a modest but comfortable apartment near the Tigres training facility. For the first time in his life, Lucas had his own bedroom, with walls freshly painted in the blue and gold colors of his new team. The electricity never went out. The refrigerator was always full. Teresa no longer had to work double shifts at the cleaning service, allowing her to attend most of Lucas's training sessions and matches. But the transition wasn't without pain. Lucas's body ached constantly from the intensity of professional training. 5 days a week, he pushed himself beyond what he thought possible, working with coaches who accepted nothing less than excellence. Schoolwork became more challenging at his new, more rigorous academy. Some nights he fell asleep at his desk, pencil still in hand, exhaustion claiming him mid-sentence. Most difficult of all was the isolation. The other boys in the youth program came from more privileged backgrounds. They mocked his accent, his second-hand clothes, his history. Street rat, they called him behind his back. Vega's charity case. Lucas endured it silently, channeling the hurt into his play, letting his feet answer their taunts. He missed Miguel desperately. They spoke on the phone weekly, but it wasn't the same as playing together on the dirt lots of their old neighborhood. Miguel's family couldn't afford a car, and the bus ride across the city was long and expensive, making visits rare treasures. Roberto found work as a maintenance supervisor at a nearby apartment complex, a position that didn't strain his bad knee and carried better pay than the construction jobs he'd held before. Teresa took classes at a community center, improving her English and computer skills. They were building a new life, brick by careful brick, around the fragile foundation of their son's talent. Carlos Vega remained a constant, enigmatic presence. He attended Lucas's games, occasionally offered brief words of encouragement, but maintained a professional distance. Lucas understood now that Vega wasn't just a benefactor, he was an investor, and investors expected returns. On a cool autumn evening, exactly 6 months after signing the contract, Lucas received news that left him breathless. His youth coach called with an unexpected opportunity. The Tigres first team was short a player for their weekend match due to injuries. They needed to fill a spot on the bench. It wouldn't mean playing time, just experience being with the senior squad for a day. An honor almost unheard of for a player Lucas's age. "They've been watching your progress," his coach explained. "This is a chance to show them you belong, even if it's just sitting on the bench." That night, Lucas could barely sleep. He lay awake, staring at the Tigres posters on his ceiling, imagining himself in that stadium wearing that uniform, even if only as a bench warmer. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed of scoring the winning goal in a packed arena, the crowd chanting his name. Saturday arrived with a surreal quality. Lucas sat silently in the locker room as professional players, men whose faces adorned billboards throughout the city, whose names were spoken with reverence in every neighborhood, prepared around him. They largely ignored him, this skinny boy with the too new uniform and wide, awestruck eyes. "Don't look so terrified," said one veteran, a midfielder named Ramirez, as he tied his cleats. "We were all young once." "I'm not terrified," Lucas lied. "Just focused," Ramirez laughed. "Good answer, kid." The match was against a mid-table team, not a high-stakes game, but the stadium was still nearly full, a sea of blue and gold that made Lucas's heart race as he followed the team through the tunnel. The roar when they emerged onto the field was unlike anything he had ever experienced. 50,000 voices merging into one thunderous wave of sound. His parents were somewhere in that crowd. Vega had arranged tickets for them. Good seats, not in the nosebleed section where they might have otherwise afforded. Lucas scanned the crowd, hoping to spot them, but it was impossible in that vast ocean of faces. The game began, and Lucas settled onto the bench, watching with a player's eye as the action unfolded. The speed and precision of professional play was dizzying. These weren't neighborhood kids or even academy players. These were men at the peak of their abilities, making split-second decisions under immense pressure. Could I really belong here? Lucas wondered, suddenly doubtful. His progress in the youth program had been rapid, but this was another world entirely. The first half ended with the score tied 1-1. During the break, Lucas listened intently as the coach made tactical adjustments, storing away every word as precious knowledge. Then came the second half, and with it disaster. In the 60th minute, Ramirez went down after a hard tackle. He tried to stand but crumpled immediately, clutching his ankle, his face contorted in pain. Medical staff rushed onto the field as a hush fell over the stadium. Lucas watched, a cold feeling spreading in his stomach, remembering his father's injury all those years ago, the moment that had changed everything for the Mendez family. Ramirez was helped off the field, unable to put weight on his injured leg. The coach paced, agitated, looking down the bench at his limited options. His gaze passed over Lucas, dismissed. Him then snapped back, a moment of consideration, of calculation. "Mendez," he barked suddenly. "Warm up." Lucas froze, certain he had misheard. "Now, boy, you're going in." The next moments passed in a blur. Lucas warming up along the sideline, heart hammering against his ribs. The fourth official holding up the electronic board with his number on it. The brief, firm handshake from the coach with instructions to keep it simple. Don't try to be a hero. Then he was on the field, the grass impossibly green under his feet, the stadium impossibly vast around him. For a terrifying moment, Lucas thought he might vomit from sheer nervousness. Then Tigres captain jogged past, giving him an encouraging slap on the back. Just play your game, kid. His game. The game he'd played on dirt lots with worn-out shoes. The game that had always made sense to him when nothing else did. Lucas took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. His first touch was clean, a simple pass to a teammate, then another. Gradually, the paralysis of fear gave way to the familiar rhythm of the game. He began to find space, to see passing, lanes to move with the instinctive grace that had first caught Vega's attention. In the 85th minute, with the score still tied, Lucas received the ball near midfield. The defense was stretched thin after a counter-attack. His captain was making a run down the right wing, calling for the ball. The percentage play would be to pass to him, the safe option, the expected move. But Lucas saw something else, a gap between defenders, a slice of space that existed for only a heartbeat. Without hesitation, he threaded a pass through that impossible, needle's eye splitting two defenders perfectly. The ball rolled into the path of Tigres' striker, who had only the goalkeeper to beat. The stadium held its collective breath as the striker took one touch, then another, then fired the ball into the back of the net. 2-1. The crowd erupted. As his teammates mobbed the goal scorer, Lucas stood apart, momentarily forgotten in the celebration. His eyes found the VIP box where he knew Vega would be watching. The businessman was on his feet, applauding, a rare smile on his normally impassive face. Then Lucas saw them, his parents, not in the seats he expected, but somehow impossibly in the front row near the bench. Teresa was weeping openly, her hands pressed to her mouth. Roberto stood beside her, tears streaming down his weathered face, pride radiating from him like light. The final whistle blew minutes later. Tigres had won, and though Lucas hadn't scored the goal himself, his pass had made it possible. As the team walked toward the tunnel, the captain draped an arm around Lucas's shoulders. "That pass," he said, shaking his head in admiration. "That was vision. That was special." In the locker room, the coach was more measured, but still approving. "Good debut, Mendez. We'll see more of you." Later, reunited with his parents outside the stadium, Lucas was finally able to release the emotions he'd been controlling on the field. He fell into their embrace, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. "I played," he kept saying, half laughing, half crying. "I actually played." "You belonged out there, mijo," Teresa said fiercely. "Everyone could see it." Carlos Vega approached, hands in the pockets of his expensive suit. "Well done, Lucas," he said simply. "Today was just the beginning." As they walked toward Vega's waiting car, he had offered them a ride home, Lucas suddenly stopped. Something had been bothering him since his conversation with the businessman months ago. "Mr. Vega," he said, "that day when you found me with your wallet, you said you'd been watching me for months, but how did you know about me in the first place?" Vega smiled enigmatically. Then he nodded toward Roberto. "Ask your father." Lucas turned to Roberto, confusion evident on his face. Roberto looked sheepish. "I sent him videos of you playing months ago, filmed on my old phone." "You?" Lucas couldn't believe it. "But you always supported Mama's concerns about soccer." "I understood her fears," Roberto corrected gently, "but I also saw your gift. A parent's job is to open doors, even when they're afraid of what lies beyond them." As the city lights came on around them, Lucas thought about doors, the one that had closed when his father was injured, and the one that had opened today when he stepped onto that professional field. About choices, the bad one he'd made with Vega's wallet, and the right ones he'd made since. About shoes, worn tennis shoes held together with duct tape, and professional cleats that had carried him onto the biggest stage of his young life. Most of all, he thought about his father's words from months ago, words that had changed everything. "The player makes the shoes, Lucas, not the other way around." On this night, he had proven those words true, and it was just the beginning.